No one thought Bravo 6 was still alive. The SEAL team had been ambushed in a deep, desolate canyon in the Sierra Nevada where not even drones could reach. The command center fell silent. Maps were crossed out in red. The final transmission: "No way out. If you hear this, tell our families we fought." Everyone was frozen except for one person. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need orders. When her A-10 roared to life, the entire base seemed to hold its breath. Because everyone knew, if she took off, something was about to change. This was not just a mission. This was a moment when a woman flew alone into a place even war itself had refused to enter. And if you're watching this story, perhaps it's because you, too, have once stood before a storm no one else dared to face. This is the story of a woman, an aircraft, and the moment she changed an entire battlefield with nothing but will and steel. The radio transmission lasted exactly 8 seconds, yet it brought all of Nellis Base to a standstill, as if something deep beneath the earth had just cracked. Bravo 6. Command. Pinned against the rocks. Enemy holds the high ground. Ammunition nearly depleted. Don't try to withdraw. This is our last time. Static swallowed the final words, leaving behind a long, suffocating silence in the tactical coordination room. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Blitz Ramirez stood near the back of the room. She didn't move. She didn't blink. The old, dust-darkened flight suit had been taken down from its hook an hour earlier, yet she still hadn't put it on. Her arms were folded, her gaze locked on the green glow of the radar screen, a faint halo of light amid the dense darkness of the warning system. The screen offered no signal, no sound, no life, only tight lines of terrain contours, like cords cinched around the throats of everyone in the room. All felt that something was ending, but no one dared say it aloud. Captain Harmon, the liaison officer with Bravo, leaned forward as if trying to touch the final signal before it faded away. He had once served alongside that SEAL team. He knew they weren't ones to surrender easily. And so, that brief farewell carried a crushing weight like an iron door closing without fanfare. Around him, senior officers lowered their heads. A few maps were pulled out, hastily marking alternate extraction routes, but no one believed in them. Drones couldn't get in. The F-16 second couldn't fly low enough. The Sierra Nevada terrain to the east, where locals called it the Devil's Throat, was a labyrinth of rock and swirling wind, notorious for having downed 3 helicopters in just 1 week of training back in 2006. Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Harrow, the operations commanding officer, spoke in a low voice. "We wait until nightfall. If they're still breathing, we'll send the Black Hawks in under moonlight." No one replied. Because waiting until nightfall meant waiting until it was too late. The topographic map glowed on the main screen. Sheer mountain walls, cutting winds, heat haze from the desert below blinding the radar. The enemy base held full control of the eastern ridge. RPG range covered every point of entry. From above, it looked like a deadly bowl with Bravo 6 trapped in the middle. Everyone knew that. Under such conditions, even retreat was a luxury. No one said it aloud, but the glances exchanged across the room all whispered the same truth. Bravo 6 was already saying their own farewell. The bravest men of the U.S. Navy were giving a final goodbye no one could answer. And then Blitz stepped forward. She didn't speak. She didn't file a report. She didn't make demands. She simply gave a slight nod, walked toward the control panel, and pulled the flight suit up over her shoulders. An aging technician instinctively stepped back, unable to utter a word, because those who had seen Blitz take off before understood. If she went airborne, something was about to change. Not a miracle, but a kind of fight no doctrine had ever taught. No one asked what she intended to do. No one dared, because they had seen that look, the look that needed no permission, no praise. the look of someone who had decided to fly into a place even machines hesitated to go. Did everyone know exactly what would happen next? Number. But they all knew one thing. If Blitz took to the sky, the heavens themselves were about to bear witness.
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
Blitz wasn't the kind of person you would remember from the first meeting. She didn't speak at length, didn't shake hands too firmly, and always left the room before anyone had the chance to ask what she was thinking. Some said she was reserved. Others put it bluntly, she's quiet to the point of being unsettling. But over time, something about her began to make even the oldest officers wary, not because she was loud, but because she always showed up exactly where she was needed, before anyone even called her name. During training at Davis-Monthan, she almost always ranked third in most evaluations, never at the top, never drawing attention. And yet, oddly enough, whenever there was a dangerous flight drill crossing landslide terrain, simulating wind shear, flying close to the ground, she was the one chosen. Not through deliberate assignment, but because the coordinator instinctively reached for her name. Sometimes, trust doesn't come from what a person says, it comes from the way they grip the stick, as if they've already lost someone before by letting go. The first time she touched the A-10 Thunderbolt II, her instructor, a silver-haired colonel who had once commanded in Fallujah, simply sighed and scribbled in his notebook. Unusual reaction, no tension, no resistance, just integration. That sentence was never mentioned again, but the technicians passed the word among themselves. She flies as if the plane is guiding her, not the other way around. She didn't fight the Warthog, she understood it. Once, during a wind shear simulation, when most pilots plunged into the course according to instructions, Blitz instead veered slightly off timing, tilted the right wing, then dipped down as if she had read the terrain before the radar did. Later, she explained, "That crosswind once took down 2 recon birds. I just didn't want to repeat it. No arrogance, no theatrics, just someone remembering what others had forgotten." But not everyone knew where that came from. Her file contained nothing remarkable. She had grown up in a small border town in Arizona, the only daughter of an immigrant welder and a nurse. Her father once told her, "If you can't see the path clearly, bow your head and listen to the wind. The wind doesn't lie." And perhaps that was what she carried with her when the class learned procedures. She learned silence. When others waited for orders, she waited for the wind. In her 3rd year of service, while supporting an urgent training operation at the Grand Canyon, an incident occurred. 2 training jets had gone off course after a burst of signal interference. They couldn't climb due to low cloud cover, and couldn't escape because sheer cliffs walled them in on both sides. The radar was useless, and the base was already preparing for total loss. Until an A-10, one that hadn't even been assigned to the mission, dove straight into the canyon. Blitz had entered the area on her own, with no orders. She flew so close to the rock face that shrubs scraped against the fuselage. A slight tilt, then a reverse direction barrel roll. An aerial maneuver theory dictated should only be used in dogfights, never in enclosed terrain. And yet, somehow, she guided both stranded aircraft out of the gorge. No shots fired, no signals sent. Just her and the wind, threading their way through a pass between life and death. No one filmed it, no reporters came, but every maintenance technician knew, and a few days later, one of them, a Navajo corporal, quietly slipped an embroidered patch into her personal mailbox. Against a gray canvas background was stitched the image of a red cyclone sweeping across 3 bright dots. At the bottom, a small line of text. Kunor Pass, we do not forget. Blitz never wore it, but she kept it in the upper left pocket of her flight jacket, where only a family crest or special mission badge would normally go. She didn't brag, didn't tell the story, didn't react when others asked. But those who knew, knew. That cyclone wasn't just a symbol. It was something Blitz carried, an unshared memory, a reason that didn't need to be put into words. And today, as she zipped up her flight suit outside the tactical room, they saw her hand briefly touch that exact spot. No one noticed except a young technician. He had never been told about Kunor Pass, yet still asked, "What's that, Lieutenant Colonel?" Blitz didn't answer. She only smiled. The small, measured smile as if to say, "It's been long enough." And would you believe it, sometimes a small piece of fabric can hold an entire battle the world has never heard of? So, what do you think will happen when the one who carries that patch takes to the sky again? Comment number 1, or "I'm still here," to keep listening. No one would remember exactly who first uttered the word impossible in the command room that day. It could have been a combat officer. It could have been an air defense technician. But what was certain was this: just 8 seconds after Bravo 6's final transmission, the room had descended into a state of disciplined panic. Every gaze was locked on the 3D terrain display. The sunken area at the center of the map flashed red Devil's Throat, a canyon of bizarre formation in the Sierra Nevada range, walled in by sheer slopes and an unpredictable network of thermal currents. Radar couldn't reach the bottom. Low-flying drones were sucked into wind eddies and dropped like flies. F-16 second? Too fast. Too fragile. Helicopters? Pure suicide. A senior officer removed his headset. "We've lost them." Silence followed. Not because everyone agreed, but because no one dared to disagree. No one wanted to be the next person pulled into that rocky gorge where even the air seemed angry. Blitz stood there unaddressed, unspeaking. She was part of the shadow, silent, but not invisible. In her hand, the flight suit was pulled halfway up her body. Her other hand still rested on the gray patch along her left arm. She lowered her head slightly, brushing her fingertips over the image of a cyclone swirling around a chain of red lights. It wasn't ritual. It wasn't a good luck charm. It was simply an old gesture, like someone touching an old scar to remind themselves, "I have come back from the impossible before." No one told her to go. No one gave her orders. But when her footsteps rang against the steel floor, that sound seemed to split the tense air in the room. A young technician murmured to the person beside him, "No way she's actually going to do it." Another, older, only shook his head. "Number, she's not going to do anything. Blitz doesn't plan. She does." The flight was not in the mission plan. No registered call sign, no support tactics. Every piece of equipment said no. And yet Blitz's A-10 Warthog had already been pulled out of the hangar, lined up and waiting. No one knew who powered it on first. Maybe her. Maybe the ground crew, because some orders don't need to be spoken. The twin TF-34 engines began to growl like a beast awakened. The distinctive sound of the A-10 not deafening, but enough to make everyone in the maintenance bay stop in their tracks. Like a distant horn announcing that something had begun and would not be stopped. Blitz walked toward the cockpit. Not fast, not slow. She climbed the ladder as if she'd done it thousands of times, which she had, but this time, something was different. She didn't look at anyone. But everyone looked at her. The crew hurried to load ammunition into the GA-8 Avenger. Armor-piercing rounds were checked, flares replenished, hydraulics tested one last time. There was a shared sense that this flight was unlike any other. One of the ground crew quietly approached her as she fastened her harness. He handed her a small cloth pouch. Inside was a second patch embroidered with a lightning bolt slashing between two mountain peaks. "This is from the Grand Canyon team," he said. "They send their thanks." Blitz gave a faint smile. The rare kind that made you remember she wasn't a machine. She slipped the patch into her left chest pocket, then sealed the cockpit latch. Sunlight struck the reflective canopy glass, erasing her face entirely, leaving only the silhouette of a pilot in a storm building. The control tower was unusually quiet. No urging, no second guessing. They only heard one line, clear over the internal frequency. Stormfront 01, request, departure clearance heading 27, no support. 1 second, 2. Then the coordinator's voice came back, small but steady. Stormfront 01, cleared for takeoff. Godspeed. The Warthog's wings whined as it pivoted on the runway. She pushed the throttle, sending the aircraft surging into the sky, flying lower than radar range and closer to the hearts of those waiting for life than anyone dared imagine. No one was sure what would happen next, but everyone understood. The sky had just lost its claim to dominion. Do you think she could change the tide alone? Then wait until you see Blitz turn the A-10 into a storm between rock and fire. Blitz's A-10 plunged into the heart of the Sierra Nevada with no call, no consent, only a reason that needed no words. As she crossed the radar boundary, the base lost her signal. But inside the Devil's Throat Canyon, where rock rose like blades and the wind sliced like a knife, she was still alive, and she was fighting. No one could see it. No drones, no satellites. Only those on the ground knew what was happening, the men counting down the final seconds of their lives. Blitz flew so low that dust from her engine sprayed against the rock face in bursts, leaving white streaks along the stone. Altitude, under 30 meters. In those conditions, a single wrong move would turn the aircraft into a ball of fire. But she didn't make a wrong move. Bravo's squad, the SEAL team under siege, was falling back toward the last choke point in the valley. Above them, enemy forces had set up RPG and machine gun lines, ready to cut them down like a noose tightening. But Blitz got there first. She caught the first heat signature through her sight. Without a second's hesitation, the 30mm Avenger roared to life. The blasts hit like hammers striking the mountain's chest. The shells punched through sandbags, sending dirt and rock flying, smashing every ambush point. Dust clouds rose like the smoke of a giant forge. The SEALs looked up. Through the haze they saw a gray silhouette flash past, vanishing behind the cliffs, bringing with it a hope they thought was dead. She didn't stop. To the south, 2 enemy armored vehicles were barreling down the slope to cut off the escape route. Blitz banked, dropped altitude, and when she was in range 1, clean shot blew the first apart. The second lost control, tipped over, and exploded moments later. Every turn, every squeeze of the trigger wasn't just a maneuver, it was a choice between life and death, and she chose life for others. From the west, a Chinook approached, carrying the rest of Bravo. Heavy, bulky, slow a target, as easy as ducks on a pond. And then, exactly as she predicted, a flash erupted from the mountainside. An RPG streaked toward the Chinook. No time. No tactical countermeasure could make it in time. She dove. The A-10 was not built to intercept missiles, but Blitz didn't care. She rolled the wings, forcing her jet wash to cut across the missile's path. The projectile veered off course for a fraction of a second, long enough to detonate harmlessly behind her tail. No one could believe it. An old officer whispered over the headset, "Did she just block a missile with her plane?" Yes, and it wouldn't be the last time. Blitz kept circling, clearing the way for the SEALs' retreat. But the aircraft was starting to fail. Hydraulic systems flashed warnings. The auxiliary engine stuttered. The display trembled ever so slightly, a bad sign. Then, another enemy group appeared on the western ridge, moving to cut off the landing zone. Blitz swung around quietly, not firing. She skimmed low, just low enough to unleash a shockwave. The enemy dropped flat, their weapons falling from their hands. She didn't kill, because saving lives doesn't always mean destroying others. The Chinook touched down, survivors clinging to one another, uniforms streaked with blood scrambled aboard. One of them, just before stepping inside, turned back to the sky. There was nothing but a fading gray speck, like a wisp of dust in the twilight. Blitz had done it. Her aircraft shuddered violently. Pressure was gone. Warning lights flashed red like ruptured veins. But she kept flying by instinct, by feel, by something that can't be taught: willpower. A ground technician murmured slowly. She didn't survive because the plane was good. The plane survived because she was still in it. She flew over the ridge, leaving the devil's throat behind, and at that exact moment, a single blip appeared on the command radar, the first signal, after nearly 15 minutes of absolute silence. Stormfront 01, alive. The base erupted. Some slammed their hands on the table. Some dropped their heads into their chairs. No one spoke, but everyone knew. A miracle had just happened, not by luck, but because someone had chosen to stand in the center of the storm. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part, the one that will leave you in awe. Take a second to leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. The moment Blitz's A-10 gave its final roar and rolled to a stop on the emergency runway, the air in the base seemed to solidify. There were no cheers, only a long stretch of silence, as if the entire sky itself was holding its breath. When the cockpit hatch opened, Blitz stepped out. Her eyes were tired, but burned with determination. Sweat and smoke still clung to the straps of her helmet, yet before her, the technicians couldn't hide their awe. One of them, the oldest in the maintenance crew, took a step back, his voice trembling. "You weren't supposed to fly, but you did." It wasn't a blunt compliment. It was a quiet confession, offered to a heart unbalanced, yet beating fiercely. Footage from the Chinook's onboard camera hit the internal network like lightning. It showed the A-10 skimming the canyon's edge like a ghost silk shadow between rock and smoke, enough to make anyone watching feel their hair stand on end. A SEAL, lucky to be alive, stared at the screen and whispered to his teammate, "An angel, flying under the radar. No insignia needed, no name spoken, just a single line enough to tighten throats and press lips shut." Military forums lit up like summer Sunday. If the definition of impossible means anything, Blitz just rewrote it. The story of her low-flight victory, almost entirely by instinct, spread from Nellis Base to Continental Air Wings, took root in the tactical rooms of Guam, and even reached senior leadership at the Pentagon. Blitz was summoned for an internal investigation. She was formally assessed as having exceeded orders, putting national assets at risk. But, as one sharp lawyer noted, not every order saves lives. The radio recordings, flight data, radar images, all sat in silent testimony for her. The story needed no language to be clear. The U.S. Air Force began revising its low-flight tactical procedures, not calling it the Blitz method, but any young pilot learning to thread through narrow passes would eventually hear about her first, like a modern legend. Some stories say that at Nellis, when new pilots ask, "Who's the one who flies like a storm?" the answer is, "Her." But don't try it until you've clocked 200 hours. In young pilot training schools, the phrase "fly by feel" suddenly took on weight. It was no longer a vague concept on a PowerPoint slide. It became a real skill, passed from Blitz's small Arizona hometown to the cloud lines over North Dakota. The public knew nothing of the internal story, but a short TikTok clip, barely 30 seconds, showed Blitz climbing aboard a helicopter, her gray flight suit scorched, her eyes weary but unbroken, posted quietly online by the PR team. It went viral in hours, layered with soft, low music titled "The Woman Who Changed the Sky." Young women, especially in the Southwest, began speaking of Blitz with admiration. One wrote, "I used to think being a pilot was for men. Then I saw Blitz flying through stone mountains and realized feel matters most." An online artist even painted her dust, covered A-10 as an ancient bird, the name Stormfront etched beneath its talons. No one had asked her to be a role model, but to that community she already was. No politics, no rallying cry, just a lone figure who chose to stand in the storm and pull others back from the brink. A week later, in an unplanned internal ceremony, Blitz was given a special edition of the Cyclone patch, this time encircled by a compass ring. The presenter spoke for her in a single line. "We don't just need to fly, we need someone who knows the way." No one laughed. No one mentioned orders. Everything was understood. She didn't speak. She accepted the patch with cold eyes and a faint curl of her lips, just like her gaze between the shards of rock the day before. No crowds, no television cameras, yet enough to spread inspiration. Because sometimes, one look, one act, is enough to let a nation exhale and know that no one dares to fly like that, except you. She had become the storm. But the story wasn't over. Behind the glow there were questions, and she would have to answer them. Will you stay to hear? From the moment the internal ceremony began, the air was unusually still. Not the silence of protocol, but the kind born of hearts waiting for a sign to delve deeper into the person being honored. When Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Blitz Ramirez was called, the stage lights were neither glaring nor concealing. They simply cast a gentle glow, enough to highlight the restrained yet weighty presence of the figure stepping forward. The old technician, the one who had once embroidered the Cyclone red lights patch in the aircraft's bay, now stood on the dais. In his hands was a new insignia silver, finely pressed into the shape of A-10 wings with a red spiral running through the middle, recalling the special storm that had pulled Bravo Team out of the Devil's throat. He extended it toward her with the utmost reverence, as if returning something she had left there, a symbol of survival written not in words, but in action. Blitz looked down at the grain of metal in her hand. The soft light glinted off it, reflecting like a memory. Once again, she said nothing. Not because she felt nothing, but because she knew silence creates the space for other hearts to echo. She fastened the insignia to her flight suit's shoulder, a perfect fit, just as she had always flown narrow and deep through the canyons of the Sierra Nevada. No one needed to say that this was the mark of an action, but all understood. The symbol was no longer a sign of danger. It was a declaration: when the sky refuses, you must turn the aircraft into a storm. An officer at the corner of the stage switched on his phone, capturing the moment. Blitz's stern eyes, her lips pressed tight, her hand gripping the new insignia just pinned on. She did not speak, but her gaze said, "We do not exist merely to be free. We exist to fly where no one else dares." A tear did not fall, but in the ranks of her comrades a hand rested lightly on her shoulder. No words needed. An act of comfort and also a promise. The story would not end here. Blitz left the stage with the same quiet steps as when she flew through the canyon pass. There were no shouts of "Hurrah!" No grand expressions of thanks. Only the sound of her footsteps, echoing through the heart of the night. And the best part there was no public press release. No live broadcast. Only an internal video shown across the base, replaying the moment she pushed her flaps while flying through the pass, then later reached up to touch the red Cyclone patch. A short clip, wordless but enough for anyone watching to understand. Sometimes, action needs no words to become immortal. The story of Blitz was no longer about a lone pilot. It had become a symbol, something others wanted to retell. She did not become a legend because she was ordered to. She became one because she chose to stand on the line that theory called impossible. When she climbed onto the logistics transport to return to the runway, every gaze turned to her again. Not because of fame, but because of the presence of someone who had reignited faith through action. No medal, no slogan. And if you think the story ended with the insignia ceremony, think again. Behind that light was a new beginning, a journey that no aircraft and no written account could ever fully contain. Have you ever seen a symbol powerful enough to change the way you see the world? Blitz has done that. And now what will happen when that symbol steps into where you live? Think about that before you switch off the screen. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Perhaps you, like me, sometimes wonder, do those who quietly fight for others ever get recognized? But the most beautiful truth is, they don't need that. They don't need to be seen to shine. They only need a reason to keep moving forward. And for Lieutenant Colonel Ramirez, that reason was life, her teammates, and the silence that deserves to be heard. If there's one thing to take away, it's this. Sometimes, you don't need wings to be an angel. You just need the courage to fly into the storm when everyone else stops. If this story has touched you, leave a comment below. Tell me if you've ever met a blitz in real life. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need the reminder that sometimes we ourselves are the storm that brings hope. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because here we tell the stories of those whose names aren't spoken but should never be forgotten.